Hey there, this is Niels Beardfoot, and today I want to show you how to make 3 more masks for a helm base that we did already in another video. All of these 3 masks will be separated in the video, so if you just want to watch 1 or 2, just jump to the timestamp shown. We start with the duck face. Get your pattern printed, transfer it on the leather and cut it out. For the nostrils, a rounded curved knife, like is usually used for wood cutting, like this one here, is quite a nice helper. Next we want to break the edges by beveling them. We also want to emboss the wedge tanned leather, so we moisten it completely from both sides, give it some drying time so the moisture is just right. And also, something I forgot earlier is that we want to thin out the edges of some areas where we want to sew them together just to make it easier for us. Before embossing, we punch quite a few sewing holes. We also need quite a few big round holes, or in my case it's oval holes. And they are only for decoration, so it does not matter what size exactly you want to use for them. But we also want to use our swivel knife to create a gap for the beak and use a beveler to give it more depth. With our favorite stone we hammer it in and create some texture, as well as with a ball pen stylus we can also create some, I don't know even what this is. Also we can use our swivel knife and our thumbnail to create some battle damage. I decided to paint with some acrylic paint in white over the whole mask. With an airbrush and some light and dark gray I create some shadows and a little bit more character to the mask. What the difficult part about acrylic paint is, it is water based. And so if there is going to be a lot of water on it, it can tear off. So we put on some resist, but be careful, resist is also water based. Also put some resist on the edges so we can use the moisture to burnish them. Once all the color is on, we can start to sew it together. Now the a bit dangerous part. We want to water harden this whole piece. Put it in hot water for about 15 minutes. Don't put it in too long if you use acrylic paint, because then it can create bubbles and this can get messy. Here's what can happen if the acrylic paint gets ripped off. It's no big problem, but we have to fix it in the end. Also, we want to sew close this gap. Important to note is that you want to give the piece at least 1 or 2 hours to drying time before you do anything with it. By the way, I dyed the flesh side black and the leather quality wasn't that good, so I got quite a few parts falling off, so this is where gum trace can really much help you. After some drying time on the leather you can start to shape it, but still be careful not to tear off some of the dye. On this mask you basically only want to roll in the eyes and then shape it to your helmet base, which is ideally already in shape. If you use clamps here like I do, be sure to not leave them on too long, because also they can leave marks. To hide our eyes in the helmet I use mesh fabric, and here it's 2 layers for me, and I simply glue them on to hold them in place for the moment and then sew them on. Important is that you want to keep them mostly stretched out and then sew them on and cut and burn off the excess. To attach the mask to the helmet base, we want to get them aligned and make sure that the holes on the pattern still fit on with the helmet base. If we made sure of this, punch these holes and use some screw rivets to hold them in place. In my first pattern version, here I was missing some leather for the next step, but on your version the pattern will also fit here. Here we want to create some holes for the pressure buttons as an additional fixed point for the mask to hold on the helmet base. And the duck face is done. This is actually my personal favorite of all threes. It's weird and I love it. On this face you're unfortunately not able to open the visor, but with the other piece it is. Stay tuned for the other two masks. Next up is the skull face, and to make cutting out easier we have to punch quite a few round holes first. Next up is breaking the edges with our beveler. To make rolling in the eyes later easier, we thin out the leather around the eyes a little bit. Next, we moisten our wedge tan leather to be able to emboss it. There are also quite a few holes needed on this mask. For a rough, used look, we use our favorite stone and just hammer it all over. With a bone photo like this, we can also add additional marks. For the skull mask, I went with some acrylic paint on the top in white and added with an airbrush also some light gray and dark gray shadows. What the difficult part about acrylic paint is, it is water based. And so if there is going to be a lot of water on it, it can tear off. So we put on some resist, but be careful, resist is also water based. Also put some resist on the edges so we can use the moisture to burnish them. Moisten the flash side a bit to make it easier when we now sew it together. For the lower skull part, we first want to sew together these nose parts, but in a 90-degree angle, just like this. Next, now we want to sew this part there, and these lines, these goes exactly here, but we want to bend these lashes a bit to fit in there. Next, to shape it and to harden it, we want to use water hardening on this. But it's important not to keep it in there too long, else the acrylic paint can be torn off by accident. I actually on this piece had it in too long and they were creating bubbles underneath. Most of them went away on their own, but on a few they stayed and I had to rip off the paint there and fix it. Before you do anything with the mask, let it dry at least for 1 or 2 hours and then you can carefully start shaping. Roll in the eyes, create the cheekbones and then put it on the helmet base that is ideally already dry and let it dry there to get the shape. Once completely dried, we can use some rivets to get these pieces here in place. To hide our eyes in the mask, I use some mesh fabric. And actually it's just 2 layers, so I can watch out, but people hardly can see me in the inside. Just get some glue around the eyes and the nose to hold it in place for the moment. Then you can sew it on, and it's important to keep it mostly stretched out. And then you can cut and burn off all the excess of the mesh fabric. To attach it to our helmet base, double check if the round hole position aligns with the one on the helmet base, punch them, and then use some screw rivets to hold it in place. To hold it in place more, we also want to apply some pressure buttons here on the cheeks. Here also check if the holes align, then punch them and set the pressure buttons. And this is it for the skull face. Just one more to go. Next up is the knight face. After cutting everything out, we want to break the edges by burnishing them. To emboss our wedge tan leather, we moisten it completely from both sides. There's also a few sewing holes needed in this one. And to give it some rough used texture, we get a stone and we just hammer it in. Also had these natural markings here, so I want to deepen them by creating some scratch marks. I dyed everything in teal as a base coat and then used some dark with an airbrush along the edges for the dark, shadowy look. With some 1000 grit sandpaper, I go over it and carefully remove some of the dye to create an even more used look. And after this, some resist to protect the leather. If you also put it on the edges, you can use the moisture to burnish them. On this mask we got stabilizers, like this one, and I use it to keep the distance on the jaw correct, because we now want to cover our eyes, the eyes area, with some mesh fabric. We just glue it in place to hold it on for the moment, and then we sew it. And with the stabilizer we make sure that the distance is correct. This is the other stabilizer, and it's for the nose area. Once everything is sewn on, get some scissors and cut and burn away the excess of the mesh fabric. We also got these cheek pieces here. They are sewn on themselves with this here, and we got 2 of them, and then just put them on. There's no real need to harden this mask because it's mostly already in shape, but we want to moisten it for a moment, put it in water, cold water, take it out, let it dry for at least half to an hour before you start shaping, and then do exactly that. Here we mostly want to fit it to the helmet base. To put the face on for real, check if the holes align from the pattern of the face and the holes on the helmet base. Then punch them and put on some screw rivets to hold it. We also want to attach it on these pressure buttons. So you also check if the holes from the face align with the one on the helmet base. Punch some holes and put in the pressure buttons. And this is it for the night face. I hope you enjoyed this video and also the different masks. Let me know which one you like the most and see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.